Line's good.
Never on!
Whoa.
Hard! Hardly.
Come on, Brent.
Line's good.
Got real close.
The hair high, right?
Try and hit 2/3.
Have they saved it for her? Yes, they have.
Ooh, welcome to Game of Stones, everybody. I am Sean Graham Scott, alongside, as always, hello, Scott.
Sean, you caught me taking a drink of water.
There's a countdown for when I'm going to start it, though.
Well, yeah, but it's like in TV when the last few seconds are silent, so the audio medium it's not really conducive to me hearing that. Anyway, how are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Refreshed.
That's good.
Sean, we talked yesterday, so this is Monday after the Men's World Championship has finished. Sean, you said, this championship game, it's on too late.
Yeah.
I got stuff to do on Monday. I'm not going to stay up.
Right.
But then I see you're tweeting from the Game of Stones account during the game.
Yes, I did stay up. I did not expect to, but I was doing other things that I probably should have waited and done this morning. Not should have, could have waited and done this morning. I just started doing them last night, and the game was on and I just stuck with it. So
yeah,
I ended up watching it.
Yeah, I thought at first, like, oh, did Sean train like schedules and tweets that were just like, boy, both teams looking sharp. But no, you stayed up. I also stayed up. I was not doing anything else.
Okay.
And so I don't know why I did, but I'm glad I did. It was a good game. We're going to talk all about the whole championship.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to get to it.
All right. So, yeah, let's get right into it. Niklas Edin and the team out of Sweden's 5-time world champion. Niklas Edin, not the whole team. First couple were with a different team. But Niklas Edin, now a 5-time world champion, a 10-5 victory over Team Scotland. A game that was much closer than that score would indicate. Nick Edin gets a 5 in the 9th end. As Tyler George noted, always good to get a 5 in the latter part of a gold medal game, eh, Nick? So that was kind of a fun little thing there. But 5 times, Scott. So question was asked by Curling Geek on Twitter. Does this confirm that Niklas Edin is the greatest of all time?
Sure. I think there's a lot of caveats that come with this, whether it's in any sport, right? Is LeBron the greatest of all time, or is Michael Jordan? Well, like, it depends who they play against, depends on the rules at the time. I think that given the level of competition right now, 5 is pretty incredible. At the same time, they get to go every year.
Yes.
So if you look at someone like Kevin Cooey, who's been 4 times, and I believe won 3 or 2. No, only won 2. So his 50%, is that better than Niklas Edin's maybe 48% or something, just because they're there all the time?
Right.
I don't know. I think it's pretty incredible. You still got to win. You got to beat all these really great teams.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very impressive. And if you want to call him the greatest, go nuts.
Right. And it's interesting, right? He doesn't have the Olympic gold medal, and I think that's important. I mean, that is what the sport is based around now, whether for good or for bad. It's all based off of winning Olympic gold medals. He doesn't have one as yet. So I think that would be a point against him in there. And yeah, the fact that he doesn't have to go through a lot of folks to get to a world championship does that impact sort of how we assess his world record? I don't know how to equate those two. It's tough to do it with any team out of Canada because it's so hard to get there repeatedly, especially if you go back to the days pre-Team Canada and you look at some of the provincial fields that defending champions would have had to go through, and in a lot of cases didn't actually even get out of the province to go to the Brier again after you win a world championship. So it's kind of hard to assess in that sense. I think the best way to look at it is, 5's a lot, and he's been to 4 straight finals, and that's pretty damn good. And let's just leave it at that.
And yeah, it's really good. And would you say like Randy Ferbey who is 6-time Canadian champion, 4-time world champion, is better? Probably not, right?
Probably not. But again, that's different eras, different competition, and
Yeah.
certainly there's a very vocal group of people that would scream about the boycott in terms of assessing Randy Ferbey's career as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. So yeah, it's a contextual thing, but pretty impressive nonetheless.
Yeah, so let's talk about the game, though, Scott. This game was, I think, a lot of fun. Maybe I was a little punch drunk in suggesting that it was the best game since the 2019 women's final. I don't know. I think the Botcher Cooey Friday game from the Briar overall had a higher level to it of shot making than this game did. But there were things in this game that I very much enjoyed and I was very much into. And I want to talk about one in painstaking detail because I had so much fun with it. But Scott, what was your assessment of the game?
I thought there, like, it seemed to me like there was a lot of really good shot making, and it was small misses that give the chance to the other team. So, I mean, I made notes through the game. For example, the first end, Edin's first, he tries to freeze and it bounces a little bit, like just a little bit off the edge. Scotland's able to hit it, and then Edin makes a draw for one, an amazing draw for one. But if he gets that in the perfect spot, maybe he's got a shot for two.
Right.
There was another when Bruce's first, like in the eighth end, he sort of wrecked coming around a guard.
Mm-hmm.
That was his chance to maybe get two. He was able to then draw the full four later on. So it wasn't any like huge glaring mistakes, but just like little mistakes. That's so often the case in curling,
right?
That made the difference. And then of course the biggest mistake in the ninth with his last shot, leaving it in a position to make or to give Nick Edin a double for five.
Yeah,
I can say that's a mistake.
Yeah, and that was an execution issue there in the ninth. They played that ninth then very aggressively, trying to get the force. I think rightfully so. They had chances that maybe there's a blank, but your chances of stealing are so low that I have no problem with the strategy there of going really, really hard. They had a pocket set up on theirs, and again, we could talk about the rocks, but I have no idea how Nick Edin on his first one in the ninth end moved the stone that was in the pocket as far as he did. He moved it 2 or 3 feet, which if you do that at a recreational curling facility, it's not going anywhere.
No, it like you say, it was frozen in between two stones.
Yeah.
Like,
Crazy.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And then on Mouat's last, he just doesn't get the freeze into the right spot. Relatively straightforward double for 3. I think it was hard. The challenge was to get it for 5 to not jam anywhere. If he jams somewhere, he gets it for 3, but he doesn't jam and he gets it for 5. And I say good on Scotland for shaking hands there too.
Yeah. I didn't see any real issue with a jam on that. I was like, and my mind immediately went to the Olympics.
Yeah.
Right. Like Edin made a tiny mistake. It gave Schuster a shot for 5 in the eighth end, I think. And that was basically ball game.
Yeah.
Same thing here. And good on Scotland for sure to say, listen, let's end this game on a high rather than them running us out of rocks, which they're obviously going to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, all right, Scott, I want to talk about, though, the fifth end. And I want to talk about this in detail because this end made me so happy and I was so impressed by it for both teams because I don't think anybody missed a shot in this end. And it was so impressive what, to me, Scotland was able to do in this end. And it's the sort of thing that we talked in the preview or in the mixed doubles. The Greg Smith shot from the Briar, that gets on 1v1. That gets retired as the 1v1 champion. Everyone loves it. And it's a fun shot. Like, don't get me wrong. Great shot. Absolutely. I think this Heidick shot, the draw in the mixed doubles was harder and better, but it's not going to get the same attention as what Greg Smith was able to do. The same thing here in the fifth end. This whole fifth end was brilliant by Team Scotland and by Team Sweden, but I want to focus on Scotland here. And it's never going to get any attention. Nothing highlight reel-ish happened, but it was effing brilliant the whole way through. So I want to start on Bobby Lammy's second shot of the end. If we can go
So
to
that is Scotland has the hammer in this end or no?
No, Sweden has the hammer.
No. Okay, so Sweden has the hammer, and on Bobby Lammy's second, Scotland has 2 center guards, and they're trying to play a double raise to tap a Swedish rock behind those 2 center guards. Is that right?
No, I think you're in the wrong end.
I'm in the fifth end.
Okay, there's only one center guard.
Okay.
So the setup right now on Bobby Lammy's second shot here is that there is a Scottish center guard, and there are Swedish stones in the 12 foot at 12 o'clock, at about 4 o'clock, and one in the 8 foot at about 7:30, if you will. Okay, so that's the setup of 3 reds, and Bobby Lammy is throwing his second one. And the question is, for Scotland, what do you do here? And there was a potential thin double on the top one at 12 o'clock and the one that was in the back near 4 o'clock. And the front end yells this down to Bruce Mouat and says, hey, like, there's that really thin double. If you hit what you can see, you probably get a double that way. Maybe a triple, but probably not. I don't think the angle was there. And Bruce Mouat says, no, let's hit this back one, which is shot stone right now, roll behind the 12 o'clock stone and sit there. So Bobby Lammy, with lightweight, sort of a barrier weight, does that, rolls behind. And then Niklas Edin on the Swedish shot, they come around, hit it, but because it's kind of buried behind everything, it rolls over. And now the 2 stones for Sweden are grouped at the 4 and 5 o'clock position in the 12 foot.
Yes.
This is where it gets great to me, because on Grant Hardy's first one, Scotland goes after the one at the top at the 12 o'clock position. Again, lightweight, just a little more than hack. They come around, perfectly judged, perfectly swept, total team shot, and then they roll over in front of the Swedish stones. And what was brilliant about this is that the double was a gimme. They could have made a double on the back ones, and it would have been just an absolute gimme, no more calls, like, that's it. And they're going to get probably only give up 2 in that scenario.
But those 2 aren't the rocks that are hurting you, right?
Yep.
Because if you play that double and Edin comes around again, then you're in a lot of trouble.
Right. So Oscar Eriksson hits the stone that Grant Hardy threw, and now you have 3 shots in the 12 foot for Bruce Mouat on his first. And they're kind of on a diagonal line through the 12 foot that Bruce Mouat can see. So he plays at the stones, and they kind of jam up, and he only gets rid of one of them. But it's got the patience of that to wait 3 shots to throw out big weight something at the red stones, to me, was so effing impressive. The patience of that, and then the execution of these soft weight shots to group all of these stones together. I was so impressed by it.
Yeah, and they were playing very patient curling all week. I think I saw them throw, draws to the wings behind the tee line, or in their game against Canada, or maybe it was the last round robin game. I think they were playing come arounds around, like 2 corner frozen rocks in the top 8 foot. They were playing like around it. Real patient team, Scotland, this week. So just before I go on, Sean, Lammy's first shot in 5 was a double tap that missed the Swedish stone. Okay. So it ended up with 1 guard. You're right.
So I was just so very impressed by the ability for them to be patient, to take the time, and eventually they get a fourth out of this. And in the moment, I tweeted that so many teams would have given up multiples there because they would have gone for something big weight when you're facing the three, try the thin angle, try another run back, something. But the patience of this team to just group the stones together, eventually you get that double later on with the other stone now that jams in a not threatening position to you at all. And you are
Hmm.
then able to be behind your center guard to a point now where Niklas Edin on his first one has to try to draw in behind. And then Bruce on his first, he's able to chase with a beautiful
Yeah.
lightweight shot. Again, that's another
Yeah.
full team shot. And then it forces Nick to throw the opposite turn on his last one to get the single.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
just a brilliant series of shots by Scotland and by Sweden to be able to respond in kind to the pressure that was put on them.
Yeah, that's right. So after the double that they made, that they were trying the triple, it was like sort of a board weight run back on Edin's draw that went in behind the center guard.
Yep.
Was in a perfect spot. Then Edin draws that. It looked pretty perfect to me, but like you say, Bruce was able to come down, chase it, and tap it through, just through, sit the two, and then Edin had to make a pretty good draw for one on the opposite path. You're right. I didn't think about that, but that's a big deal, right?
Yep.
You're comfortably, you've just played one side, and now you got to switch to the other.
Yep.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. So for me watching it, I'll take ends like this over Hulk Smash any day of the week. And none of those shots that were in that fifth end would make a highlight reel. None of them. And yet, to
No.
me, that was the most brilliant end of the game for both teams. For Scotland on the strategy and the patient side, and for Sweden being able to execute. Really, for the last 10 shots of the end were made perfectly, exactly as called. And it was just a masterclass of curling. And I was so into that end. And that's really why I stayed up, is because that end to me was so great.
Yeah. And throughout the rest of the game, it was such good shot making that ended up forcing the other team. You know, there was always like, maybe if I can make this just perfect and get a miss, I'll be able to get a 2. But they weren't the whole rest of the game. It was just really, really great execution that we saw.
Yeah, just a wonderful end of curling. So if you were to go back, and I think that's probably maybe even when I tweeted about having the most fun in a game since the 2019 Women's World Final, because that end was just so great. And if you are going to show somebody, to me, like really just high level, really great combination of strategy and execution, full team shots, because the sweepers were essential on all of these shots, that just show them that end. That was just brilliant to me.
Yeah, for sure. And that's definitely a thing we never see in the club, right? Is that everybody in the club is so eager to get shot or to sit 1 or sit 2 that you're not patient enough.
No.
At doing those things, like let it build. And of course that usually is because the execution is not good and we need 4 tries to make it.
Of course.
But yeah, it's a definite difference between the guys that are playing at this level and what we're doing hucking rocks on Thursday nights.
Yeah, and Vic even said that during that end. He said, at the rec level, you go after the shot stone, and they're not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they're playing in some respects a different sport than the rest of us.
Yeah. So I mean, really great game by both teams. One pretty bad mistake was the difference.
Yeah, with the second half of the games, Sweden did have more pressure on. If you look at the sixth end, there was really no chance at a multiple score at any point in that end. Same thing in the eighth. You never really felt like Scotland was going to get a multiple in there. So I would say overall the right team won if you look at the whole scope of the game. But generally, yeah, a very well executed game, and I found it very entertaining.
For sure.
So Scotland with the silver medal, that moves them up a rung from their previous highest finish at a world championship for Bruce Mouat and the team. I don't think that really would provide much solace today, but in a couple weeks, perhaps that'll make them feel a little better. It's certainly a tough loss given everything that was going on in the bubble. On the other sheet last night, the Swiss and the team skipped by Peter de Cruz with Benoit Schwartz throwing last. They pick up the bronze medal and a record 4th bronze medal for this team at a Worlds.
Definitely their 3rd in a row. So, yeah, just not able to get quite over that hump. I mean, this was a tall task them to do, right? To come out and win 3 games in a row.
Yeah.
On Sunday, we talked about that during the Scotties. That whoever came out of that tiebreaker had a real tough road to the final, and yeah, they sort of ran out of steam there in the game against Sweden.
Yeah, but good on them to come back. Like if you were going to think of it over the course of the day, well, which game are they going to lose? Well, the 3rd one. But even after having lost the semifinal, which also forces them to now have to play off against Yannick Schwaller, which was a detail that I was unaware of, that if they had made the final, they're the Olympic team. So they lose that game. They don't have a chance at a gold medal. They don't have a chance now to secure their spot as a team, the 4 of them, in the Olympics next year. That would be a full, total fine excuse after 2 long days of has the bubble broken or not, to just, all right, like I want to go to sleep. This is a 6-end game and we lose 9-1. And I don't think anyone would have blamed them for that, except for maybe people who don't want RCF to get a medal. But like, just on a human level, it would have been totally understandable for them to have just a complete letdown and just, all right, we're done with this event. Let's move on to the next thing. To their full credit, they did not. Came down to the end, nip and tuck the whole way. So full credit to Team Switzerland and the 4 of them, because I don't know if I could have done that in the same spot.
Yeah, really, really good comeback. They gave up a 5 in the 5th end to Niklas Edin, and I just realized that Niklas Edin scored 2 5s in the semifinals and finals on his way to winning the World Championship, and that was when I sort of thought, oh, well, this is done.
Yeah.
And then you're right, for them to come back, play as well as they did. They had like a pretty good game there. I think they shot 93% as a team. Really, really, really good.
Yeah, that's a good score.
Yeah. 92. But like to go from that low of, oh man, we could have, guaranteed us going to the Olympics. We could have had a shot of not winning a bronze medal again. And then to come out with the fire with which they did and play well, hats off. We did see sort of the wheels fall off the RCF team. Sergei Glukev wasn't able to, play hero and rescue his teammates the way he had earlier in the week. So a tough day for them on Sunday, but a very good showing. And we'll see if we see Russian athletes at the Olympics. I think they should be there now, according to this, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, we'll see if we see any athletes at the Olympics.
Yeah, that's obviously a game that I didn't watch that closely because I was watching the gold medal game.
Mm-hmm. Well, all right, let's talk about anything else from Sunday, from the semifinals or the qualification game. We bid adieu to John Schuster in the early afternoon. Tough loss for them in a game that, I mean, I don't know. Like, if you put up Switzerland against the Americans, I would give a slight edge to Peter de Cruz, even though the Americans had played well all week. But I think just in general in that matchup, I think Switzerland is a overall stronger team.
Yeah, I think so too. The credit, though, to give to Team Schuster for coming out, all the hubbub around the positive test. Was it a false positive? Was it a positive? Did the bubble break? Did it not? All of that, credit to them. They came out, they parked all that, and they played well.
Yeah.
Switzerland just played a little bit better. It wasn't like a huge blowout. They were in it the whole way. They came out, they fought hard, and I'll give them credit every day of the week, even though I didn't predict them to win. Good on them for coming through it.
Yeah. No argument there. Tough afternoon for John Schuster and for Matt Hamilton too. Yesterday, which not great when you have two players who are below everybody on the other team, and it's just a tough day for them to come up. But yeah, like a close game. They had a chance. They gave up the 2 and 9 to go down 2 points, and you heard on the stream that John Schuster was saying to the guys, "Hey, we've scored more threes than anybody else this week, so let's just go do it again." And I love that attitude.
Let's go do it. So yeah. And Sean, do you want to talk at all about the decision by TSN not to air that game?
Yeah, so let's talk about it. We did a broom stacking with Jonathan from Rocks Across the Pond after the semifinal, or after the I don't even remember what game it was
after the qualification game.
So we did a broom stack. So I'm assuming that everybody who's listening to this is aware of what happened, that after the game on Friday night, there were reports of a positive COVID test, and that turned into positive COVID tests, plural, and that all the games were suspended on Saturday. There was a press conference about 5:30 Eastern time on Saturday afternoon, just describing what had happened and that they had hoped to be able to play on Sunday. As of Sunday morning, there was still no news that had come out, and then it was announced that the games would start at 11 o'clock local time on Sunday morning with the U.S.-Switzerland game. The semifinals would be played at 4 o'clock local time, and then the final and bronze medal game at 9 o'clock local. 4 positive tests from 4 different teams, and one of which was that later confirmed to be an American player. And John Schuster confirmed after the game that it was Chris Plies who was the one who tested positive. Everybody who tested positive, the report out of the World Curling Federation, the release that they put out, was that every one of those players subsequently tested negative on Saturday. And in partnership with Alberta Public Health, it was decided that the games would go on. Now, TSN decided not to show the American and Swiss game, citing the health and safety of the crew. So there clearly was some apprehension on the part of the crew to be on the ice with a player who had tested positive. And what we saw later in the day, too, is that even when TSN came back, Vic, Cheryl, and Russ were in the booth, and they had some camera people on the concourse, but there were no TV cameras at ice level. There were a couple photographers down there, but no TV cameras at ice level. They used the overheads and the end shots for everything in that game. And what I said on the broomstack, and I still feel this way, is good for TSN and good for the crew and the broadcasters to all come together and at least publicly be unanimous in saying that we're going to support each other. We're not comfortable, so we're not going to broadcast this game. So I think it was a good sign of partnership and teamwork of everybody at TSN. And I know those folks get really tight, especially probably this year in the bubble. And coming together like that, I took it as a good sign. And I kind of just appreciated that TSN and Bell were supportive of their people in that moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the health and safety of your employees is paramount, and the answers that they were given wasn't good enough for the standard that they had set, and as a result made what I'll say is the right decision, but a decision that maybe some people didn't like. But at the same time, we were able to watch that game on YouTube here in Canada, so that was also good.
Yeah.
And when they came back, I was a little surprised that they didn't have the camera people on the ice, but don't begrudge them that at all. No. For a lot of these curling events, Sean, it's the same camera crew that TSN uses, that Sportsnet uses.
Yep.
So they'll be gearing up to cover the slams later this week, and so I'm sure didn't want to put themselves in any risky position, especially with that event coming up so soon.
Yeah, and if you want to get a bit of an insight into how that kind of works, Andrew Stokely, when we talked with him last summer, who's a sound guy who has done stuff for TSN, he's done stuff for Sportsnet, he's primarily right now doing Blue Jays, and I don't think had the greatest of days on Saturday. But if you want to get a sense of kind of how that works, how you go between companies when certainly on-air talent doesn't do that, but these guys these men and women who work on the front lines of the event, if you will, they do it all the time. So go back and listen to that discussion with Stokely, and he kind of explains that, I think, better than we could, because that's what he does. That's his career. So so you will see a lot of the same folks staying in the bubble for the Grand Slams coming up. But overall, I think that was a really tough situation. Just in general, you get these positive tests, and I'll just reiterate what I said on the Broomstack. I was stunned to learn that they weren't doing daily tests. I think they should have been doing that. The exit testing for the teams who need the negative test to go home, that makes sense. That sure, of course, you're going to run them then, but I think just be more proactive than you need to be. Run the test throughout. That's what surprised me about it. Whether or not these are truly false positives at this point, we don't know. And the World Curling Federation itself hasn't outright said they were false positives, but they've really intimated that they believe they were false positives. And I hope that is indeed the case.
Yeah. So if they're false positives, then the integrity of the bubble is intact, and they can be a lot more confident going into the next Women's World Championship in the procedures that they've set up. And to be honest, the way things all worked out in this event, I think the procedures were pretty robust. The procedure was not transparent, but that's okay for me. I don't need to know everything, as long as the athletes who are there feel safe, and feel safe and able to do their job. With the slam starting, it's not Curling Canada run event, so we'll see what if any changes to the procedures there will be.
Right.
I don't know at this point. Maybe somebody else does, but I don't. And so yeah, like the thing like wearing the mask during the games, is that something that's going to be put in place for the slams? Maybe. To be honest, I can't imagine it will be. It's a TV sport. They like to see the faces of the athletes, but we'll see.
Indeed we will. I think keep the men and women apart, though. Like that's the one thing I would say, like right now, is try to keep them apart. Like you don't want a case of COVID from the men's side, if indeed there was one, to make its way to the women's side, and they're quarantining at a different hotel. So if it's possible to keep them apart as much as possible, just for safety reasons, it would suck to have a COVID situation come through the Grand Slams and disrupt the women's worlds, which, to be fair, or not to be fair, but in all due respect to the Grand Slams, the Women's World Championship is more important than these two events.
Yeah.
So we should do everything possible to protect it, because Scott, these women can put on a show. And
yeah, they can. And they're going to be also competing to get their countries into the Olympics.
Yep.
Same as the men. It's going to be another long haul.
Yeah, it is.
But I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. So Scott, what else from the Men's World Championship? We got the Olympic teams set. Sweden, RCF, the Americans, Canadians, Scots, and Swiss are going to Beijing probably next year. And some teams that fell out that maybe we had high hopes for. I certainly had high hopes for Japan and Yuta, but they struggled early in the week. They were 2-6, but were able to climb their way back to 6-6 before losing a game that looked like they were sort of ready to leave against Sweden. Norway, of course, and Stefan Wallstedt, they got off to the hot start. They were at the top of the table for a while, and then things caught up to them. They end up at 7-6. You were high on the Italians. They go 7-6, also miss out. Everyone else lower on the table, and probably nothing too surprising there. Maybe just the Koreans, just because we didn't know who they were. We hadn't really seen them at this level. Them going 2-11, maybe a bit of a surprise, but I mean, we'll see if we see these guys back here again, if they're the team that goes to the qualification event. Of course, that'll depend on who wins the Korean Nationals next year. And overall, Scott, if you're looking at 3 spots still available at the Olympic Games, Italy, Norway, and Japan, based off of this week, look like they're in good shape.
Yeah, I would say those will be the favorites. I was really impressed with Amos Massaner of Italy. He ended up being the third highest shooting third in the event. Really played well on this. He had the strength of 100% game in the 10th draw, which was pretty impressive. I was also pretty impressed, Sean, at the end of the week by the Germans. They seemed to, take their time to get their feet under them. But then Sixten Totsic really started playing well towards the end of that week. Pretty good game against the Canadians as well in that last draw. You sort of had to come back and was able to keep putting the pressure on. So well done there. The others not so different from what you would expect. In our preview, we talked about the Danish team and not really knowing exactly who came out of their national championships because they were canceled because everybody got COVID. They ended up going with a combination of the 2 top teams, which I thought was weird, right? So they had Mikkel Kraus throwing the skip stones. They had Tobias Tune throwing third, and so those 2 both skip the teams. And then throwing the second rocks but skipping the game
was Mads
Nørgaard. So that was a weird choice, right? It was sort of like, let's not prefer one of these 2 skips over the other. Let's just throw somebody else into it.
Yeah.
What did you think of that strategy?
Not a great idea to have guys who haven't played together. Take 2 guys who are skips and don't let them skip. Made no sense.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a recipe for success.
No, for sure. So I mean, I'm sure they'll look at that and see how they can improve moving forward. But I think you're right. Those 3 spots pretty secure for those 3 countries we mentioned. I was pretty impressed by China too. They took their time to get a feel for the ice, but I think they did get better towards the end of this event. I don't think they'll contend for a medal, but they're improving, and it's nice to see the Chinese team getting better sort of in real time as you watch.
Yeah, they made some really nice shots. And yeah, the Chinese curling on the men's side hasn't really found any success in general. Just in the Pacific Asian region on the men's side has struggled and lagged behind where the women are in terms of finding success at the international level. So yeah, for the sake of the sport, you do hope that certainly the Korean, whoever comes out of Korea next year, does well. That the Chinese team, they're already in, of course, the Olympics next year, so they can be competitive. And then if Utah gets in as well, so you'll see that the region represented, I would expect. But at the same time, because China finishes last in this on draw shot challenge, they were the worst of the 3 2-11 teams who all beat each other. The region now loses a guaranteed spot. So someone will have to come out of the PAC championship and go into the last chance worlds qualifier.
Yeah. And if we see that different team from Korea, whose name is escaping me right now, them come back into the fold as the Korean champion, I think they could definitely fight to try and get in that last spot at the Olympic Games.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out. I don't know if anybody who wasn't there this week is a threat for one of those 3 spots. Maybe, but there's nobody that really jumps out on first take when you look at these teams. And certainly if you take the 4, maybe 5, but of Italy, Norway, Japan, Korea, and then even someone like Jaap van Dorp who they can win some games against the Euro B level teams who would be vying in that last chance qualifier. So really good. It'd be, I think, surprising to see a team who wasn't here qualify for the Olympics, but that's what the last chance qualifier is for.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we'll see if anybody's able to come out of that. I'm just looking on the World Curling Federation website, and I don't see they haven't announced the event yet, right?
No, there's no dates or location. There may be dates. There's no location for it. Because
I don't see anything here.
Yeah, because Curling Canada, when they moved up the trials, it wasn't explicitly stated that it was because the World qualifier is in early December. The last chance qualifier is in early December. But it might have been part of the decision making there. But that's total speculation on my part, because obviously you don't want to have the trials be scheduled at the same time as the last chance qualifier when you aren't 100% sure that you're in. That would have not been great.
Yes.
So, Scott, speaking of Canada and Curling Canada, we haven't talked about Canada and Brendan Botcher yet. Interesting week for them. They had a really bad Wednesday, dropping 2 games to RCF in Sweden, come back, win their game Thursday, win their game Friday, finish up 9-4, and lose in the game against Scotland, the qualification round game. And I tweeted after the game, I don't know who could have beat Scotland that night on Friday. Scotland played really well. But overall, first time now for Brendan Botcher and the squad in a world championship. How do you assess their week in the bubble?
I think, Sean, mission accomplished. I will say, for the Botcher squad. The goal this week, I mean, for them was probably to win.
Yeah.
But for Curling Canada was to solidify the space in the spot in the Olympic Games. They did that. They got experience themselves at a world championship. I talked, we did a live show on Friday, and I talked about how it seemed to me weird that the Botcher team, it seemed to me like they went away from their bread and butter strategy that they had at the Brier. You talk about this team as a team that's not going to run away from anybody. They don't blow anybody out except for John Schuster. And like, it's frustrating to me to watch them play a team like Korea and have Korea be in the game the whole time, and they can't seem to pull away and slam the door on them, right? And at the end of the day, they hang around, and Korea pulls out the win in the end. I didn't see that kind of curling happening from them and the Brier. I felt like they were throwing hits. They were okay to blank ends. I feel like in this event, they didn't feel like blanking ends as much. It was like, well, let's put up guards and try to go around. And it was somewhat puzzling.
Okay.
Other than that, they did a good job representing the country. I wouldn't join the chorus of people who say, oh, they're terrible because they didn't win.
Sure.
Like, obviously not. They're not terrible. Chelsea Carey's not terrible. They're all great curlers. Mm-hmm. So let's stop with that, that narrative. But it seemed to me like maybe the time in the bubble, right? Maybe the time in the bubble had caught up with them a bit.
It was a long time for Brendan and Darren. They've been there for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Darren wasn't feeling great physically. He talked about that with the girls on their podcast when they talked to him. So physically he wasn't in the best condition, and yeah, you're stuck in this bubble. So yeah, it's kind of hard to assess. I think if you look at the numbers at the Brier, 9 of their games were decided by 2 points or less. So they are a team that is going to play close games. They're not going to run out and hide. And of those games that were decided by more, one was against Yukon, one was against Northwest Territories, one was against Brad Gushu in the last draw of the event, where Brad Gushu looked like me. So, it's not, it's not a situation where they do run out and hide, because they just don't. And if you look at the numbers for the week, their last stone efficiency in this event was 46%, and they forced at a 54% rate. So those are pretty good numbers. They were plus 19 overall. Sweden, perhaps unsurprisingly, ran away in the plus minus category with 52% of a last stone efficiency and 67% on a force efficiency, which is actually the same force efficiency as the Scottish team had. But overall, I think they just weren't quite as sharp as we've seen them before. They did look like they were tired at points, just mentally and physically exhausted. Maybe Ryan had something on that when he looked at the schedule. I'm still not fully sold on the schedule itself being a factor, but it's not, they didn't play to their absolute best, but you also have to remember that there are teams there who are trying to ensure that you don't play to your absolute best. The other guys drive nice cars too, as the saying goes in professional sports. So I think overall, probably a little disappointing for them personally, and certainly below where I thought they would finish in this field. I picked them to win. And so in that regard, I'm a little surprised, but I don't think that when you look at the field, when you looked how everything played out, I would not call this a disappointing week for the team. I would certainly think that Curling Canada would view this as a hurdle that was gotten over. I don't think Curling Canada would necessarily call it a successful week. I don't think the Botcher team would either, because they went in and they would have wanted to win. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a win. I will just say that the first time they went to the Brier, they were 3-8 and looked completely out of their depth at that time. Their first time at this event, they went 9-4 and did not look out of their depth at all. And the first time they went to the Brier was 5 years ago. So the total growth of this team is very impressive in a short amount of time. And Brendan Botcher still has yet to probably reach the prime of his curling career.
Yeah. And Sean, looking at the statistics, he was the number one skip all week. So
it's pretty good.
The shots that he was missing were just the ones he was missing at the wrong time.
Yeah.
A roll off here, a little too heavy there. That gave them the games that they lost. Now, I mean, even if they had beat Korea, which you would expect, and everything else had gone the same, they would have finished third and played Switzerland. So,
right.
It was going to be tough no matter what. Every team that made the playoffs there was good, or at the very least hot this week. So, yeah, I mean, you play tough teams, you're going to lose some.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah, I think gone are the days of people going undefeated through these fields.
Maybe unless you're Rachel Homan.
Maybe. But even if you look at when she did it, it's still 6 years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. And nobody's really, I think, come close to it since. Maybe there's been a one-loss team through it, but it's hard to run through these fields. And if you look at the game Friday night too, nip and tuck the whole way. I think overall the Scottish team was a little better overall. And when you look at the last shot that Brendan Botcher went to throw, that was one where, he saw it and he sees angles, one of the best in the world. No question about it. But I didn't quite see what he saw. And I don't think Darren saw it either. But they did what I think is, of course, the right thing. You defer to the person throwing. He sees it. But that, I don't know. I'd be curious to see if someone asks him during the Grand Slam, if it comes up at all, if looking at that shot back, if that's a case of, does he still think that angle was there in the way it was? Or is that a case of, I've been in this bubble for 2 months and, I don't know. I'm just curious about it. And, or I mean, the stones are lively enough that, yeah, maybe it was there and he just didn't hit it in the right spot from what he intended to. But at that point of the game, it was so low percentage to win that he had to try something. So,
yeah. And in the ninth, he threw a guard that was in a very good spot to stop Bruce Mouat from drawing for two.
And then he made it.
And Mouat just made an incredible shot.
Yeah.
Like he threw it heavy enough to just tap and roll forward off of the Canadian stone frozen to another. It was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I didn't expect him to make it. And all credit to the Scottish team for putting that shot together. Real team shot.
Yeah. Brilliant.
on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And another one that's that'll probably make a highlight, but I don't think just seeing the stone in from the hog line, you would appreciate how hard that was.
No way.
Yeah, very
No way.
very
That was
impressive
really,
stuff.
really hard. Really good.
All right, well, Scott, anything else from the World Championship that you want to talk about?
Well, Sean, probably we should talk about our picks, no?
We could. I had Canada, as I mentioned, to win. Neither of us got the 6 playoff teams correct, and that is because RCF got in, the Russian team, and Sergei Glukov and the guys. So overall, Scott, I believe I got 5 of the teams correct in the playoffs, with Japan
Yes.
being my pick that I thought would make the playoffs and did not. And I believe you got 4 right.
I did, yeah. US, I thought that there was too much time off for Schuster, and I was wrong.
Yeah.
And yeah, RCF, I don't think anybody picked them.
Right. So who did you have in? You had the Italians in.
The Italians and Japan.
And Japan. Yuta letting us both down.
Yeah.
Come on, Yuta.
We'll have to let him know about that.
Yeah, I'm sure he's very concerned about what we think about our picks.
And then I had picked Scotland to win.
Yes.
I thought it was Bruce Mouat's time, and it was just 1 5-ender short.
Yeah, he came close. So there you have it. Neither of us got this one right on the numbers, but not terrible either, I don't think. So Scott, how did you do on your wagering on this event?
So I made money.
Nice
on Niklas Edin winning. So
all right,
that's good. That's all that matters, right?
Would you have made money without the matching offer that you got?
If I had bet the same amount on Niklas Edin, then yes, I still would have.
Okay.
Curiously enough, I bet money on Scotland as well, and that was the only bet that would have returned me less than I had invested.
Right.
So I wasn't too sad when Edin popped that 5-ender.
Yeah, making money.
That's all it takes, right?
That's it. Just that easy.
I'll probably just withdraw it all and buy Game of Stones merch. So
that's fine. I'll take it.
Yeah,
I like it. So yeah. So there you go. Scott made money, and even though his picks were worse than mine, weird.
C'est la vie.
Yeah. Of course, I did not wager on the event. As you know, as a member of the media, Scott, of course, I have to remain impartial on all these things.
Oh dear.
So there you have it. Our recap of the men's World Curling Championship. If you want a little more in depth on our thoughts about the potential of the bubble breaking, do head over to the podcast. We did Broomstack, as I mentioned, with Jonathan from Rocks Across the Pond yesterday, and that was pretty much entirely devoted to the situation on COVID. So if you want more detail than what we talked about here, you can find it on the Broomstack, which is still available in the video section of the page. So this one, though, we wanted to focus mostly on the rocks themselves and the men who were throwing them all week.
Yeah.
All right. Good contribution, Scott. So that'll do it for this episode. Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you have not yet, please do subscribe to the show wherever it is you get your podcast. Do the likes, the ratings, comments, all that fun stuff. Helps other people find the show and keeps us chugging along here. And, of course, do follow along on social media at Game of Stones Pod on Twitter and Instagram. You can find Scott at Scott Lakes TV. I am at the Sean Graham. Let us know what you want to hear on the show. Get in touch. Game of Stones Podcast at gmail.com and head on over to gameofstonespod.com. All the past episodes are there. Plus, as Scott mentioned, the merch. I got my hoodie last week and my toque just in time for spring. I really like the hoodie. It's super comfy. I was laying down watching the game last night, all sort of snuggled in my new Game of Stones hoodie, and it was delightful. And Scott, you have just done the latest monthly donation to Sandra Schmerler and Food Banks Canada. So once we get some new orders, we will continue that and get some new donations in.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
All right, so that'll do it for the Worlds on the men's side. We will do something for the Grand Slam at some point. So do keep an eye on the feed for something associated with the first Grand Slam, the Players' Championship, coming up this week. I can't remember who sponsors it. Somebody. But it's the Players' Championship that gets going later this week out in the bubble. It'd be fun to see some more new faces and some returning faces heading back to Calgary. So we'll be there to follow along with you. So do keep an eye on the feed. But until we talk to you again, keep those brooms on the ice and don't dump that intern.
Make the final.